Well, now comes the big question of where we see Moon Knight again, because this didn't tie off anything. Moon Knight, final episode, and that statement is a little bit unfair. It tied off the immediate storyline, but okay. My review of the last episode, which I liked quite a bit, I expressed a concern that they were laying so many storylines that had not yet been wrapped up and were hinting at so much more that I had a hard time believing that we were going to get everything satisfactorily addressed. And I don't mean 100% explained. I mean just having a satisfying end point with just one episode, standard length episode at that, left to go. And I also expressed fear that the last episode would be action heavy because it was the climax and it would leave even less time to explore any of the stuff that was actually hooking me into the show. It's really annoying when I'm right about this kind of stuff because yeah, this is real action heavy. This does technically address Jake Lockley insofar as confirming that he exists, but we still don't really know how he fits into things. It does a weird tie-off on the psychiatric end of things in a way that didn't fully make sense, and I feel like they shouldn't have even brought it up again, considering that it's not really dealt with. They should have just let it lie where it was before. There's some things that happen that I don't even know why, but they have to happen when they do, because otherwise the plot freezes up if you take time to try and deal with them more. Mainly I'm talking about things like how Mark and Steven even get out of the situation that they're in about, 10, 15 minutes into the dang thing. And then it's just action stuff, and it's competent action stuff, and Amit gets raised, and, we practically have an Egyptian deity kaiju fight, which, cool, I guess. Right now, I'm debating in my head whether I'm more disappointed by this or by the last couple episodes of WandaVision. Because I'm frustrated about these for fairly similar reasons, which is that you ended everything in an action climax. And yes, unlike WandaVision, this has had action beats along the way, so at least makes slightly more sense here, but the action has not really been what has sucked me in and made me interested in this. And you basically stop doing all the interesting stuff in order to have an action ending. And again, I suppose I'm more frustrated with WandaVision insofar as I have and will continue to argue that show had no business having an action climax at all in any way, shape, or form. Zero business. But this, I would say, it's not wrong that it has an action climax. I'll come back to my concern over it being only 6 episodes long. It needed more episodes to satisfactorily address other stuff so that all these other elements didn't feel like they were shortchanged, rushed, or otherwise unexplored because we had to have room for an action finale. Which, again, the action finale does at least fit the character and the story. It's just they cut the legs out of the stuff I was interested in order to fit the action finale in. And I wasn't looking forward to the action finale. And there are some decent beats even in the action finale. Okay, I liked what they did with Layla. I don't know if in the comics if Layla is actually an avatar of Tawaret or has any powers of any kind. I don't know if that's original to this show or not, but I like it either way, and I didn't necessarily see it coming. And I actually really, really, really loved the little moment of her saving this tipped over van of people and stopping it from crushing this young girl, and the young girl asks her, "Are you an Egyptian superhero?" The answer to which is yes. It's a small moment, but it's actually worth acknowledging, because while Moon Knight conceptually is very wrapped up in Egyptian mythology, or at least an interpretation of it, he himself is not of that culture. Layla is. So I just think that was a really nice thing to do, to take 15 seconds out of your episode to do and just make clear, yes, this is not a story that just takes place in Egypt. You have seen the birth of an Egyptian superhero. Cool. Thank you. I like that. But I actually don't know if I have too much else to say. This is probably going to run short as a review versus my normal length because I don't even really have a rant in me about this. I made a prediction about how this episode could potentially really frustrate me, and it did exactly what I was afraid it would do. All the psychological stuff and the character dynamics and interactions hooked me way, 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 way better than the action stuff did. And at this point, I feel like the handling of Jake Lockley is just blatant sequel bait. And at this point, it's really frustrating not knowing where he's going to show up next. Because this is officially still a miniseries. This is not season 1. Now, okay, so let me put it this way. If we end up getting another season of Moon Knight, I am retroactively going to be really annoyed that it wasn't just presented as a season of what would be a continuing show right from the get-go, because it leaves blatant stuff to be picked up and dealt with later. And I wouldn't have minded that if this was called season 1, because I would think, oh, they're leaving strands to be picked up later. But when you present it to me and bill it as a miniseries, I expect a more complete story than this. Because it completely leaves so much hanging with the actual lead character. All this really properly ties off is the villain, who is also way less interesting the instant he gets superpowers, because I liked Ethan Hawke as Harrow. I thought he was a good villain, but he was a good villain on a philosophical plane when he was talking. Here, it's just, well, it occurred to me why they gave him long hair. It was to make it easier to slot in the stunt double so that the hair could kind of conceal the face. But, it's his stunt double waving a staff around. That's the climax, and that's not the strength of this villain. And he was a decent villain, just not for this ending. I don't know where we're going to see Moon Knight next. Like I said, maybe they'll just drop another season, another series. Whether they call it a miniseries or another season, who knows? I'm not saying I wouldn't like to see it. I would. But if that's what we get, you really should have said that ahead of time, because you tell me miniseries, I expect something better than this for an ending. I suppose the other possibility, he could show up in movies. If I were to make a guess, because we still don't really know what they're doing with Blade yet. We know Mahershala Ali is playing Blade. They have seeded him playing Blade because his voice was heard in one of the additional scenes at the end of Eternals. And it also hinted at him sort of partnering up with the Black Knight. So I'm wondering if they're setting up for a Midnight Suns something, whether it's a movie or a series or whatever. And Moon Knight would slot into that pretty well. And depending on how it was used, might not require, a ton of background knowledge. You drop him in and you'd be like, you explain the basics, multiple personalities, agent of Khonshu, but, sort of subliminarily put the asterisks on it. You want the full story of how this works, check out the series, which, is a very comic booky way to do it. I don't know. Until I know where I'm going to see Moon Knight next, I'm just frustrated. And if the next place he ends up is something like Midnight Suns, I'll still be frustrated, because it will mean that he's going to have to take either a background position or share the screen with a bunch of other characters, and we're not going to get a proper dive into his character and psychology and the balance of his personalities, which again was what I liked. And it just felt, well, we won't really end dealing with that. It's not awful. It's not terrible. And look, if you were missing the action scenes. If you found all the stuff that I was intrigued by boring and you were waiting for the next time he was going to suit up and punch guys in the head, you were probably a lot happier with this than I was. And fair enough. What I liked about the show may not be what everybody liked about the show. But speaking for myself, for the perspective I have, it's just disappointing. Not abysmal. Not like a fundamental misunderstanding of what the strengths of the show had been up to this point, like, say, the WandaVision conclusion was. But it didn't follow through and stick the landing on any of the stuff I actually liked. Moon Knight, final episode. What are your thoughts on it? Whatever they are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon's how I pay the bills. Like, share, subscribe, help me out as well if you are not rolling in dough, which I get. Also, there's links to other stuff I do down in the description. Don't worry too much about it, though. We take a relaxed attitude around here, so you can just come on back next time you need a break. And credits. I got to shout out my top Patreon supporters, so thank you very much to Zubin Lutfullah, Tarak, Oliver B, Melinda Walters, Leotha Boyd, TT, Renobulax the Poodle, Eidolon, Tracy Scrabbit, Vincent Paul Bartolucci, Angry Caspero, Adam Lefty Taylor, Shane Ross, Robin Moore, Shayla Gourlay, and Brendan LaRose. Couldn't do it without you.